We're just going to bring you these live and exclusive pictures here from inside the presidential palace.
These scenes shocked the world this time last year. The presidential palace in Afghanistan filled with Taliban fighters. Within moments, the Taliban were back in power of Afghanistan. But where did this all start? Without going into too much detail, the US supported freedom fighters to rid Afghanistan of the Soviet invasions, which took place between 1979 and 1989, leaving the Afghanistan government supported by the Soviets to fight off the Mujahideen until 1992, which then turned into a civil war between all the separate Mujahideen factions. The Taliban came out on top and controlled over 90% of the country. Then 9/11 happened, and the Taliban refused to hand over bin Laden, who was in the country. The rest is, well, history. Fast forward to 2020 and the signing of a peace deal between the US and the Taliban, which set out to end the war, having a full withdrawal of foreign soldiers from Afghanistan in return for the Taliban ending all ties with international terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda. The framework to end the war was set in place by the Trump administration and fulfilled by the Biden administration to take us to the day the last US soldier left the soil of Afghanistan. After a grueling 20-year war, countless deaths and a $2 trillion price bill, the longest war in the history of America was over. But before we got the famous image of the soldier boarding the plane before the 11:59 deadline on August the 31st, we got the famous images shown at the start of this video.
I'm not entirely sure which desk they are sitting behind, but there it's almost like a family photo shot of the Taliban fighters.
The collapse of the Afghanistan government left the capital under the control of the Taliban. Panic arose throughout the country as foreign governments began evacuating personnel, and the US Army destroyed bases and military weapons. Some Afghans chose to flee the country, but the promise from the Taliban was, everyone has immunity. But 1 year on, where is Afghanistan today? The main concerns of the international community were the safety and education of girls and women. A quarterly report found that while opportunities for women slowly increased over the past 2 decades, women's rights in Afghanistan failed to achieve the structural change the US and international partners had envisioned. This continued into the reign of the Taliban, who promised security for girls' education. Education would continue for girls only till the 6th grade. Girls above the 6th grade were told to return to their homes. Now, only some secondary schools remain open in the country, with reported strict uniform rules. The international community continues to pressure the Taliban to uphold their promises regarding the rights of women. Another main concern for the international community was the opium trade. Afghanistan accounts for more than 80% of the world's opium trade, which was banned by the Taliban in early April 2022. The ban included the production, usage, transportation, trade, export and import of all other drugs. Poppy growing was initially banned by the Taliban when they ruled in the late 90s to early 2000s, but after the invasion of the US, the harvest of the poppy seeds began to expand throughout the country, despite the billions of dollars spent by the US government to combat the industry. Which takes us to the next important discussion, the economy. Since the withdrawal of US forces, the Afghan economy has been in an absolute freefall. More than 22 million people could face life-threatening food insecurity, and 9 million of them are close to being afflicted by famine. One major factor is the freezing of funds by the US. A reported $9.6 billion from the Afghan Central Reserve has been frozen, leaving the country pretty much broke. The US claims it is a preventative measure to avoid misuse of the money, much like the $132 billion spent on development assistance by the US, which most was found to be misspent and misused. But the sanctions on the funds make it difficult for aid to flow, especially to areas in need. Certainly places like the site of the 5.9 magnitude earthquake that took the lives of 1,000 people. These funds certainly could have been critical in providing assistance and aid. Some would also argue that the crippling economy could have been revived. Earlier this month, Joe Biden announced the killing of Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri by a drone strike in Kabul, causing much concern over the peace deal signed by the US and the Taliban. Both parties claim the other has violated the agreement. The US was not to launch airstrikes on Afghanistan soil, while in turn, the Taliban were not to harbour any international terror organisations. So, 1 year on, and talks of violations to the peace agreement have begun. The question is, will the fragile peace continue?